And welcome everyone to this week's webinar. I'm going to start here as we often do when we're working with any data set within the call analytics reporting in the history lookup section. And for purposes of today, I'm going to be looking primarily at just a handful of fields from the call manager uh, in the call manager CDR data. So I'm just going to look for connected calls. I'm just using yesterday, part of yesterday, so that I have a reasonable set of records to work with. And I've already brought them up here. So I'm just going to go ahead and expand that out. And so now what you see on the screen is a lookup for connected calls for yesterday, where I've included just 8 primary CDR fields along with the date and duration. And when we're looking at Cisco data, the inbound and outbound and internal, they don't really tell us, or there isn't things in the data that inherently indicate what call type it is. And so we generally have to do a little bit of sorting, figuring it out. And a lookup like this is going to help us do that. So on the originating or calling side, I have these 4 fields: the originating device name, the originating IP, the originating device type, and the original call party, and the calling party number. There we go. So those 4. And then on the called side, we have 5 fields actually, because I added in the original call party number, and I'll explain that as I go along. But we have the final call party number, terminating device, terminating IP address, and terminating device type. So in looking at these 9 fields, this is generally what we would use to help figure out how are we going to identify inbound, outbound, and internal calls. Now, those are kind of broad categories in a sense, because one, in one environment, you might not want to consider certain calls as internal, say, if we're looking at calls that, come into your UCCX. So there is some variance, and we're happy to help you work through that. But for purposes of today, I'm going to kind of keep it to 3 scenarios plus a couple more. So when we're looking at these records here, we can look at, on the calling side, typically your caller ID is going to be a longer number than where that call is coming into. That can be, in our demo environment, that's a 4-digit extension, or a 5-digit hunt group, or a 6-digit UCCX number. But generally, you can go by the calling party number and then either the original or final call party number field, kind of at your discretion, for determining the inbound and outbound. Another way to go about it is to go based on device names. And this tends to be a little bit more granular, where you can look at specific devices. And because of the way our lookups work, you can have your physical phone devices and your soft phone devices. I'm not sure if I'll have any come up here, your CSF devices, but you can key off those to show, if a call terminates at a phone, then that was either incoming or internal. But then if you look at the device name on the originating side and see that that is, say, a SIP trunk, or some other device that isn't a phone, then you can make determinations about that. Another way to work through this is to look at those IP addresses. If that's, from an administrative standpoint, that's easier. You can look at the termination points. And then you can also, depending on how your environment is set up, you may be able to work on device types. And so you could say that, if a call originates on a SIP trunk, then that would be an incoming call. If it terminates on a SIP trunk, then that would be an outgoing call. So with all that said, I'm going to jump over into I'm going to segue here from the history into the configure, because what I've done is I've created public search sets to go through this and hopefully help this become a bit more understandable. So I've got these 3 scenarios. The first one here is going to be based on the calling party number, or the original or final call party number. The second one is going to be based on devices and device types. And then the third one is going to be based on IP values. And so these will get different record sets. So there isn't hard and fast rules that these are all going to work the same. And so we'll be looking at some reports as well to help you kind of see what it would look like under each scenario. So for the to get at inbound calls using the calling or original or final call party number, if we look at that again, the caller ID is going to be at least 10 digits. So we can use our wildcards, the capital X's there, to say that the field ends with 10 digits, and then we can say that where it came into, the original or final, if you want to substitute that, would be the extension length, 4 digits, 5 digits, or I could add 6 digits here if I wanted to get those UCCX devices. If your environment has full 10-digit numbering on your DNs, then this perhaps wouldn't work unless you had, say, leading digits like an area code exchange or something here, so that you would be able to zero in on the numbers that are relevant for your environment. So then for the internal, it's just taking what we just looked at and switching around a little bit and saying, okay, now the original call party number is still a 4 or 5 digit number, but now we're saying that the calling party is as well. So that's how we can get just the internal traffic. And then for the outbound, we just flip things around and looked at the caller as a 4 or 5 digit, and the original or final call party number would be 10 digits or more. So I have an example of that up. So here's a report that I generated for a few hours of data yesterday. And so I've included here the search set, so you can see what the search set is looking up, and then we can see our various counts and so forth. And this is in this instance, we'd be using the search sets to separate out the call types. And so then we have our totals, and then we have I have the same fields here that I had in the lookup, or most of them. And you can see that all the pieces of information are here for us to go through. I'll go over now and start in on the second way of doing it, and that is based on the devices. So in most environments, they're predominantly the SEP or CFS, CSF as the leading digits for the device names. So in this instance, I'm getting pretty specific. I'm saying these devices terminating the call that originated on a SIP trunk. So this is kind of saying this is inbound from the outside world, or from from the cube, or from so there could be some activity that would be separated out, so that I wouldn't expect to get as high a totals here. But again, it all depends on how you define your what is inbound versus outbound versus internal. So for the internal on this one, I just say that the originating and terminating devices each have to have belong to the same device naming convention. And then the outbound on that is just flips it around so that it's starting on a phone device and ending at a SIP trunk. And you may be able to, in your environment, to use some combination of what I'm presenting today. So these aren't hard and fast rules. Even amongst us, the SE team here, we all have kind of different experiences and working with different customers that they can be a little bit different, and maybe a little bit more involved. So then we'll go down to the third one, and this is kind of the least likely to be used. Would be where you're looking for calls that are originating on a IP that is from one of those outside, like SIP trunks or cube devices. And so you would be looking at that solely to say that's an inbound call. Internal would be not having any of those involved in the call. So we use our does not equal operator there. And then the outbound would be those as the terminating devices. So it's fairly simplistic, and we'll we'll go and look at the examples of those last two that I brought up. So the one here where we're using devices and the SIP trunk device types as compared to, let me go back up to the top here. In this one, using the same lookups, we got a total of 1,138 records using the numbers as I define them. In this next one, the number drops considerably because we're specific about this being, a certain type of device, both on both the front and back side of these calls. And so if this isn't what you're after, then it may be that you could use the devices, but then we'll come up with some other combination for the terminating side. Uh, and we're happy to help with that. Looking at the data as it is in your environment. And that third option there, where we're using the IPs, you see that we get even more records there, because this one isn't going to. This is going to have probably, yes. So it's going to have those UCCX devices. It's going to have just a broader application to the data. You see voicemail in there, that 8,000 number. So it's really, whatever works for your environment. But if I go back now to the lookup here, if you have your system available and you can go into history lookup, set up for these fields, maybe grab a screenshot or review the video at a later time. This is where we'd start generally when we're helping customers make this kind of determination. I'll spend a minute just going into the reports, because I was using all the public search sets here. Just want to make sure that everyone knows how we go about using those. So here are the reports that I had set up for today's webinar. And in the search sets, rather than using this create option and going through and setting up all my criteria, I instead created the public search sets, these durable uh, uh, criterias that we can apply, across multiple reports. They can be applied to dashboard widgets, and they can be applied to access into the system too. Maybe not widely applicable for the content that we're doing today, but I did want to point that out, that these public search sets have wide applicability and a real powerful tool. And I took advantage of it here today. All right, so I do have a couple other things to show you. So I have a report here that I refer to as the easy way. And it's really, if you're not so much interested in the internals and you just want to get the inbound and outbound, what you can do with that is, where did I put it? Within the grouping stats. So let me go bring that report up. So the easy way. So here within the grouping stats of our report, if I were to take, in this case, I'm just looking for a single extension. I don't have one of those search sets here. So I'm doing a broad sweep. Anything where this extension 1548 either made calls or were the final player in the termination of the call. So here within the grouping stats, we have the ability to add a grouping option for originating and terminating. And so that I call it the easy button because it's built in and you don't need to do anything to get kind of the inbound and outbound side of it. So here, 1548 for the time period had 28 calls, and we show 11 originating, meaning that they made those calls, and 17 terminating, meaning that they received those calls. And I'd like to point out too that when you're looking at who's consuming the reports, and if some of the Cisco terminology that we use by default is, you don't really want that in there, we provide you the ability to create label sets where you can go in and change, the names of these summary headers to be whatever you want to make it clearer to the people that are, consuming the data. Because we don't want people to get confused just because they're not on the Cisco side of things. They're just, office professionals making and receiving calls. I'll go into one more here, and that's going to be the use of rate tables. And this is unique to the call manager environment. And first, though, I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to go to the show hide columns here, and I'm going to add the elusive call type column. So we have the ability to create rate tables, and they can apply rating, but they can also be used to apply typing to calls. So this is what it looks like in the detail columns, the call type column. I just created a rate table that had some categories for inbound, outbound, and internal. And I'll go ahead and show you those now. So here is the rate table, the call type rate table. And here are the 3 call types that I've set up. So if I were to go and edit the inbound, this one I'm looking, it's very similar to the calling and final call party number that we were looking at before. But in this case, I'm just simply saying that the origination is a minimum of 10 digits and the termination is a maximum of 5 digits. So you can see how that would grab those same types of calls that we had in here. So, your 4 and 5 digits and your 10 or more digits. And then I created an outbound one. So for the outbound, I just flipped it around. So now the calling party number is a maximum of 5 digits. If I wanted to, get in another digit, that's 6 digit for some of those, other extensions, like for the UCCXs, I could change that to a 6 and probably still, get more calls than categorized under this call type without having any adverse effects. And then on this one, the termination would be 10 digits or more. And then internal is pretty straightforward then. We have a maximum of 5 and a maximum of 5 to show that that's internal. So if I bring up that report, this one is a little different in that I've utilized the grouping stats, and I'll go in and show the actual report configuration here in a moment. But in the grouping stats, I grouped by call type. So here for this time period, it looks like that's yesterday, 7 to 7 or 8 to 5, 8 to 7. We have 498 that were classified as inbound, 124 as internal, 193 as outbound, and then we have this no associated call type. So this tells me that there's 174 calls within the data set, which I think I did this for connected calls for yesterday. So I can jump down to the details on that, and I can see, okay, this was not classified. Where did it not meet the requirements? So, I can look at the calling and final call party numbers here, and I can see that, there I've got this 6 digits and 6 digits. So if I were to go and add that 6 digit to, rein in the UCCX, I think I'd be getting most all these. Then we have a parking lot device. Whether we want to do anything with those or they're really probably better off excluded. All right, so I said I go back and we'll look at that report. And for that one, here in the grouping stats is where I use that accounting call type. So if you were to set the rate table up and you started getting that detail column populated, you can do that here, and then you can see that the other stats that are available. And if I didn't want to see all those UCCX ones, I could simply toggle that off. I'll take a quick moment here and just show with the rate table, when you configure that, by default, a rate table, even though you've created it, it's not really used anywhere until you go into your cluster settings. And within the management of your cluster, that's where you can assign that rate table. And you can assign multiple rate tables too. So if you wanted to have one specific to incoming, one for outbound, one for internal that you would manage separately, you could certainly do that. You just set the priority, where to look first for the processing engine, second, and so on. One last little thing that I think I had up here was there. So that easy way, that report that I had here that just showed the originating, terminating. If we're not interested in the internals, I threw that into a widget as well. And if I go in and edit this widget, you can see that I actually used my search set here is that easy way report that I created. And then within the configuration, I use those same stat columns that I had utilized in the report. I'll see if this will come up for us. If there's any questions, I'm happy to start fielding them now while we wait for this to refresh.
Yeah, actually, while that's loading, we do have a question, and I think we're probably going to answer that question with what you're showing now. John's asking, can we show these as charts and graphs instead of PDFs, or some type of visual, not text, that leaders wouldn't understand since it's just text to them?
Right. So when we're looking at some of these things, what we would probably have to do is create individual reports, an inbound report, an outbound report, because when it comes to the graphical representations, well, you know what? Let's go ahead and let's try it. We're going to go. We'll do one here. We'll go to the report. Whoop, find my tab, and we'll do number one. We'll go in our search set stats. We'll throw on a volume chart. So most of our graphs, they're all going to be time based. So if we were to do date there, I'll throw in date. I'll take off hour of day, and actually we can leave hour of day on there. We'll get a couple here to look at. And I'll throw on a couple of those columns that I had in the other report. So I'll go ahead and save that. And then we'll see what happens if we run this. I will leave it as a PDF because it'll still have the graphs in there. And then that's all set for the previous day. So we'll go ahead and run this. And we'll see what we get. Whoop. Adobe jumped in the way. There we go. Yeah, so because it's the search sets, it's putting them all into one. So we can't have those categories that we created with the public search sets. So what we would need to do as far as reporting would be to create a separate report for each call type. And then of course, these would be available for that last one, the easy button one. That one we would be able to, if we were, keep losing my place, for the easy way one, we'd be able to go into the grouping stats and turn that on. So if the internals aren't a big part of what you're looking for, we'll generate this one real quick. We have a couple minutes. Run that. Oh, nope. So that didn't do it either. So that it looks like I had thought that perhaps this one would allow us to break out the graphs on the call types, but it didn't quite work out. So within the reporting, for the examples that I created today, we'd need to create separate reports within the dashboarding. It'd be real easy to create a widget. Let me see if I can make a copy of this guy. And here in the search sets, I could go based on, say, the first search set is the inbound. I could call it inbound See if these guys will come up for me. But now this one would just reflect the stats that I have here, or really anything else that I built into a widget. There's 6 different widget types, and they each can have a stat bar at the top. This one being specifically just a call stats widget. And we'll see.
And while this is loading, John was asking to see the example of a cradle to grave call. I guess in a chart format. I don't think that that's an option at this time.
Yeah, it isn't at this point. We can create search sets for the cradle to grave to allow you to isolate calls, but it doesn't have. Well, let's go in there too. We'll jump into go into one of these, because if we go to the start to finish, we enable this. If we were to create a search set, we could have, yes, we could have some summary information, but it wouldn't be in the forms of the charts or graphs. It would just be the statistic types. But if we wanted to, within the cradle to grave, we could create a search set that was built based around, say, those public search sets that I created, although we can apply them in here because there's so many dependencies in the cradle to grave going back up to the original search set that there is no good way of applying a public search set either in the start to finish or in the grouping stats. But it would be possible to create a search set and say, only incoming, only outgoing. And if there's a use case for that, we'd be happy to help John work through it. I always like to help other people named John. We stick together.
Right.
Yeah.
And one last question that he had was actually, is there a dropped calls option? So I would take it abandoned, I guess, is what.
Right. So drop can have a couple different meanings, whether it's just drop because the person gave up. Typically those would be in abandons, and there's the way that those are the way that those are counted are based on a number of criteria. One of the primary ones being is that we have a date time origination on it. We don't have a connect time, whereas we can have, say, a 0 duration call, a connected call that still is 0 duration because it has a connect time, but it's the same as the origination time. And there's other factors involved. But if we're talking about drop calls where there is a malfunction of some sort, from the phone system, then we would get into cause code reporting, and that's kind of a different topic, but maybe something to put on our calendar if we don't have something in our base of webinars. Thanks for all the questions, John.
Are you sure it's not you, John, that's actually typing in the question in here?
I wouldn't give myself that hard of questions. I'd give myself softball questions.
Yeah, so he's saying it's in relation to the call preservation mode.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. We can certainly have that as a takeaway and see what we can find out for you, and maybe we can work together on that.
Definitely. All right. I think that's it for the questions at this time. Anyone have any other questions that they would like to ask?
We're always happy to help. So you can always email support@verify.com, and you get to work with one of us SEs and help you work through whatever little nuances there are in your call manager environment that may appear different than what I had up on the screen today.